Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. This is the business of sports.
The business of sports can be intimidating or hard for a startup to break into.
We really appreciate when our owners are actually there, with us through the journey.
Teams, ours especially, have been very intentional to diversify at all levels of the company.
I think we're in the golden years for the NFL and college football.
Our demographic reach has continued to expand.
This is going to be really unlocking the streaming platform for sports fans.
Sports valuations are rising. We'll see when they peak.
You don't have to be the best in your sport to make a whole ton of money.
Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr, along with my colleagues Damian, Sassower, and Scarlet. It's a special edition of the show today as we get ready for the big game on Sunday night. The Philadelphia Eagles and Kansas City Chiefs will face off in Super Bowl 59. We'll take you down to New Orleans, where our colleagues Jason Kelly, Vanessa Perdomo, and Randall Williams got to sit down with several big names in the world of sports. We'll hear some of their conversations, including one with a guy pretty familiar with playing in the big game. Hall of Fame quarterback Joe Montana.
I think going international is fun. I mean, we only went for preseason when I was playing, but I think playing games for real it's a lot more meaningful, and it's a lot better for the fans of that country.
All that and more is on a special edition of the Bloomberg Business of Sports. But first, we bring in a longtime friend of the show, Amy Trask. She's former CEO of the then Oakland Raiders, and she's an analyst for CBS Sports. Amy, welcome back to the Bloomberg Business of Sports. Thank you for joining us.
It is my tremendous honor and great pleasure to do so. We are big Bloomberg fans in this house.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And you know what? I remember the last time we talked, we had so much fun. So I got to ask you again. I'm just going to give you the easiest question, and then we can get into some more business. Super Bowl 59, Kansas City Chiefs, or the Philadelphia Eagles? Your thoughts?
Well, that's not the easiest question, but you did pitch it slow and easy across the plate, to use a baseball metaphor. I don't have a prediction, and the reason for that is these are two very, very good teams. The matchups are phenomenally interesting. Philadelphia's offensive line versus Kansas City's defense, two great quarterbacks. Of course, Saquon is a tremendous addition to the Eagles. I don't have a prediction. I do have a preference, if you would like that.
Yes, please.
Many will find this strange, given that I spent almost 30 years with the Raiders. But I want the Chiefs to win. And there are two reasons. I'm an AFC girl. I spent my entire career in the NFL in the AFC with the Raiders. So I always lean AFC. Some people think it's odd to root for what was my divisional rival. But my view is that if your divisional rival wins it all, it shows how good and how competitive and how hard your division is. The other reason is a very, very sentimental reason. I started my career with the Raiders in the mid-'80s. When I walked into my first NFL owners meeting, I was the only woman in that room. And notwithstanding that when I entered the league and entered that league meeting, the Raiders in the league were already embroiled in a very significant business dispute. One of the very, very first people to walk over and welcome me and offer me his support and encouragement was Lamar Hunt, the owner of the Chiefs. And Lamar and his wife Norma and their son Clark, who now is in charge of the Chiefs, offered me support and encouragement throughout my career. So I am, for that sentimental reason as well, hoping that the Chiefs win.
That is a great reason to root for the Chiefs. And, that phrase you mentioned, the only woman in the room, I feel like that's something that you can apply to when describing so much of your experience when you're in the front offices of the NFL. We hear, according to Punchbowl, that President Trump will be attending the Super Bowl this weekend. And we also know that there's going to be a lot of security efforts just in general because of the New Year's attack in the city of New Orleans. I'm curious to get your take on whether you think there's going to be tension around DEI issues with Trump now attending the Super Bowl. Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, has made it clear that he thinks DEI has been good for the NFL. We know that the president feels otherwise about DEI and has made his points in several instances. Do you think that that's going to come to a head?
I don't know if it will come to a head on Super Bowl Sunday. My hunch is, I was going to say my hunch is it won't, that everyone will be focused on the game, but I stopped myself as I was about to say that because, as you well know, nowadays different topics come up at times we wouldn't expect them. Yep. As to the topic you raised, I owe my entire career to the fact that I worked for a man who hired without regard to race or gender or any other individuality, which has no bearing whatsoever on whether one can do a job. And I recognize that not everyone has the good fortune I had to work for someone like that. I'm asked all the time, am I excited when a woman is hired? And my response is, what's really going to excite me is when such things are no longer newsworthy. Mm-hmm. And the example I always use is the movie Apollo 13. There is that scene where Ed Harris, that's the actor, the character he's playing, walks into a room and there's a bunch of NASA scientists and engineers around a table. And he dumps a bucket of pieces and parts onto that table. And he says, using only what is in front of you, find a way to get those men back to Earth alive. Do you think anyone on Apollo 13 gave a damn what the race or the religion or the gender or any other individuality of the people around that table was? Of course they didn't. They just wanted to get home alive. That's what I am hoping for in our future.
Amy, I have a very important question for you. Do you think that Taylor Swift wore red at the Grammys in honor of Travis Kelce and the Chiefs? I mean, I'm thinking she probably did, right? But no, I'm just seriously, we got to talk about your Raiders here. We got to talk about Chip Kelly. Talk to us about what's going on in Las Vegas.
I certainly will, but I want you to know when you started asking that question, I didn't know you were teasing, and I thought, wow, this conversation just took a turn. And by the way, I do think she wore that dress in honor of...
Nothing's accidental, right, Amy?
I'm going with the fact that it was paying tribute to the Chiefs. I like the hire of Pete Carroll by the Raiders. I think he brings a maturity, a stability, and energy and enthusiasm that will be tremendously helpful to the organization. I really do like the hire.
People want to play for him, right, Amy? It just seems like a different state of mind there now.
I mean, I watch Pete Carroll and I think, hell, I'd run through a block for him. I'd make a tackle for him. And by the way,
how old is Pete? I mean, he's old, right? I mean,
73.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. He's got to be the oldest coach in the NFL. Yeah.
Because I'm on Bloomberg and I have so much respect and admiration for all that Bloomberg does in the business world, I'm going to give you an analogy. Pete Carroll may be 73. Well, you know what? Warren Buffett's 94, and he's doing just
Absolutely.
fine.
I want to ask about Roger Goodell, NFL commissioner, and recently at a press conference in New Orleans ahead of Sunday's Super Bowl, he said that, he wants to reach eventually 16 international games a year. What do you think about that? Is that a realistic goal?
I worked closely with Roger for decades. I maintain a tremendous relationship with him. I have a lot of respect for all of his business acumen and other things. I'll note in that regard, I do think it's realistic. Look, let me do the math for you. And by the way, every single person in my village, family, friends, always groans when I say I'm going to do the math on air because quite often there's an error. But even I can do this math. 32 divided in half is 16. So as long as there are 32 teams, and I don't see expansion in the future, certainly not in the near future, 16 can work.
Do you think they'll increase the number of games played in order to accommodate this international schedule?
I think the number of games will be increased to 18 at some point. I think that's the case whether they go to 16 international games or not. Look, going back to the doing the math thing, I like 18 rather than 17 just because then the math is easier to do when it comes to calculating win-loss records. I do think we'll see 18.
Amy, the NFL coaching carousel is in full swing. We know about Aaron Glenn to the Jets, Schottenheimer to the Cowboys. John Gruden, he was the one who was originally brought in to coach the Raiders, to give them stability. And, my question is, what about him? What about Coach Mike McCarthy? What about what's happened with Bill Belichick, going to North Carolina and leaving the NFL behind? Some of these older coaches, is there still room for them in the NFL?
Well, I certainly don't think age should be the limitation, and the Raiders just demonstrated that with the hiring of Pete Carroll. Will those men end up back in the league? I don't know the answer to that. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them did. As to the John Gruden issue, there's so much focus on who leaked the emails, why they were leaked. I have a view as to who leaked them. I have a view as to why they were leaked. But it's disappointing to me that so many focus on the emails rather than focusing on the content of those emails. Those emails contained racist, homophobic, misogynistic comments, and a team that were to hire John back has to realize that in so doing, that sends a message within the organization.
Amy, how do you defend Patrick Mahomes? And let me ask you, let me put some context around this. I mean, he's an amazing player. I mean, he's tough enough to defend as it is. But, you know, with the refs and the lack of replay, and I don't want to say flops, but yeah, flops. How do you defend, as the Philadelphia Eagles defense, Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl?
Well, the words of Aretha Franklin come to mind. Say a little prayer. He is extraordinarily hard to defend. I do not buy into the refs have the fix in. There's a conspiracy. They're trying.
No, he's good. He's good at flopping.
I don't buy into that at all. And by the way, he did apologize for what he did on the sideline during a previous game. There's Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to mendacity that which can be explained by error or by mistake. And yes, I'm toning down Hanlon's razor a bit. I don't think the fix is in for the Chiefs at all. Now, how do you defend against Patrick Mahomes? That's where I will go back to Aretha Franklin. You've got to find a way to keep him as contained as possible, and that's very, very hard to do. But the Eagles have a terrific defense, and look at it on the other side as well. The Chiefs have to do that with respect to Jalen Hurts, so I'm excited to see what Spagnuolo has in mind in that regard. I think he's the best defensive coordinator in the league.
Our thanks to Amy Trask for joining us. She's the former CEO for the then Oakland Raiders, currently an analyst for CBS Sports, and author of the book, You Negotiate Like a Girl. Up next on this special big game edition of the Bloomberg Business of Sports, we'll talk with two people about private equity stakes in a team that just fell shy of the big game this year. For my colleagues Damian, Sassower, and Scarlet Fu, I'm Michael Barr. You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports, Bloomberg Radio around the world.
This is Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr, along with my colleague Damian Sassower. It is a special big game edition of the show today as we get ready for the Philadelphia Eagles and Kansas City Chiefs to face off in Super Bowl 59. Our colleagues from Bloomberg Originals and across our Bloomberg newsroom went down to New Orleans this week. We'll hear some of their conversation later on in the program, including with NFL Hall of Famer Joe Montana. Before we get there, we turn to a franchise that had big Super Bowl dreams this year, but just fell short.
Whole season for Buffalo on the line here. They come. He just desperately throws it up in the air, incomplete. Kincaid was right there.
While superstar quarterback Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills are licking their wounds for falling short against the Chiefs again this year, overall the arrow is pointing up for the franchise, and on the business side, a lot of investors are excited about the Bills' prospects. Joining us now are Theresia Gouw and Tom Conaghan. Theresia is a co-founder and managing partner of venture capital firm Acrew Capital, and Tom is head of the capital markets group at McDermott, Will, and Emery. Acrew is among the firms to make a private equity investment in those Buffalo Bills. They're both here to talk about the Bills and private equity in the NFL and more. Theresia, Tom, welcome to the Bloomberg Business of Sports.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
You got some coin in the Buffalo Bills. Theresia, I'll start with you. Tell us a bit about that.
So the investment in the Bills is in some ways the realization of a childhood dream, and also in some ways not that different from my day job of 25 years, which is being a minority investor in tech companies. Obviously, this is different in my hometown football team. So it was when the opportunity arose and I was able to chat with the Pegula family, I couldn't pass it up. It's something that has been important to my family since I was a small kid, and my parents and I immigrated to the Buffalo area. Dad was season ticket holder and raised me and my sister to be Bills fans. He even used math to use football to teach my sister math. So Andre Reed was number 83, and so she learned addition and subtraction, but also multiplication, 8 times 3. I use that myself with my own kids to build the third generation of Bills Mafia in my family by asking the kids questions like, how many different ways can you get to 9 in a football game?
Oh, see, this is Tom.
Did Theresia just say Andre Reed?
Yes,
Thurman Thomas, Bruce Smith, Cornelius Bennett.
You did, because I'm a big NASCAR fan, and my oldest son, who loves NASCAR too, when he was little, that's how I taught him numbers. I said, "What number is that?" "That's 43, Daddy. That's Richard Petty." I'm like, "Yeah, boy, that's the way to do it." I'm proud of you, man.
Well, Theresia, let's take a step back for our audience. You're the co-founder and managing partner of Acrew Capital. You're Stanford. You're Brown. You're engineering. You're an MBA. You have sat on boards for so many tech companies, and now here you're an owner of the Buffalo Bills. Talk to us a little bit about that process, how you got there. What was it like?
So, the process in some ways is very parallel to my day job, right? Which is when I heard about the opportunity that the Pegula family was thinking of bringing on minority investors, and my day job is being a minority investor. So oftentimes the key thing is finding a connection to the majority owner, in this case, Terry and his family, and then making your case for why you are passionate about the company, in this case, the Bills, but also what you can bring to the group, understanding that you're going to be just a minority owner. So not get in the way, but add value when asked in the appropriate way. So that in that way, that was the same. Now, the part that was different, and this is where I'll hand over to Tom, is I've had the good fortune to be involved in several multi-billion-dollar IPOs and public companies, from Trulia to Facebook in the early days. And I got to say, the legal process in becoming a minority owner in the NFL, it's a lot.
Recovering?
It's a lot. I spent a lot more time with Tom than I have with other of my attorneys.
Well, Tom, let's bring you in. Tom Conaghan, co-head of the capital markets group at McDermott, Will, and Emery. Talk to us about what that data room must have looked like. What level of transparency? I mean, did Theresia have to? I mean, did they go back to her early years, like when she was 6 months old? I mean, what did they need to do? What kind of due diligence did they require?
Let's put it this way, Damian. The professional sports leagues, the NFL is not alone, cares deeply about who their owners are, right? It's really central to their mission. Like, what is the mission of the league? Protect the product on the field. Make sure you never alienate your fans or lose their trust. And that starts with knowing who your owners are in every team, right? So, of course, they asked a lot of detailed questions. They wanted to know a lot of things about Theresia, her other investments, and Theresia had to produce a lot of information to satisfy them, for sure.
Well, Tom, and I want to get more into that, because I want to buy a share of the Detroit Lions. Yes, I do. I love my Lions. There we go.
Hey, so I was hoping for a Lions-Bills Super Bowl.
So we're going to go off in another direction. Tom, what questions are they going to ask? And are they going to ask me about that embarrassing spoon thing?
I think you'll be okay with that, Michael. Really, what they're concerned about are, conflicts of interest, right? The leagues, again, they want to make sure that the fans trust the product on the field and that the level of competition is accurate, right? And that everyone's operating on a level playing field. So they want to know that the owners in the various ownership groups don't have interests that might, either in fact or in appearance, create some conflict of interest, right? There are salary caps, so they want to know that owners don't have other outside relationships with players that might be arguably end runs around salary caps. And they want to know that the owners don't have investments in industries that might either in fact or in appearance, create drama for the league, right? They want to avoid any ownership drama and keep all the eyeballs on the product on the field. And that's what the league's mission is.
Theresia, you are the co-founder of Aspect Ventures. You're a treasurer at Brown University. I mean, you're a Forbes 100, top 100 on every list you can ever imagine. You probably still sit on a lot of other boards. How do you have time also to be a passive investor in the Bills? I mean, what's the ask on you from a time perspective?
When you're a Buffalo's Bills fan, you're not passive.
Fair point. So the great thing about it is that it doesn't have any specific requirement. Unlike my day job where, I'm making an investment and I'm asked to be on a board, it's really more people, the ask is have the financial wherewithal and pass all of the requirements to be accepted into the group, and then be there as a resource to the other owners, the other minority owners. We also brought in one of the first private equity investment groups in Arctos in the NFL, and obviously to the Pegula family, and then to the One Bills Drive leadership, to Pete Gwelly and the others. But it's really more, hey, they know we're fans, they know what our other areas of expertise are, and then they ask us from time to time to do certain things. So I had a call recently with somebody who's looking to grow the Bills data analytics team because in my day job of investing in tech companies. And so, but that's really more like, I want to do it. Oh, great, I can be helpful there. I wish I, could catch a 4th and 5, but that's not going to happen. So you got to find ways where you can add. So it's really that's really what it is. Finding ways to be helpful when asked.
Well, let me ask you this, because I'm not a venture investor in the tech sector, right? And I would imagine that some of these businesses that you've invested in started as a project of passion, right? And so what you're saying to me, and it's kind of interesting, is you didn't invest in the Buffalo Bills to get an ROI. You invested because it's a passion for you. And I wonder, is that very different than what you've done in your history?
It's a great question. It's actually very similar, because in my startups, they are often 3 people, 4 people. So the initial investment interest to learn more is because of the passion, the passion of the founders. In this case, the passion of the team, but also Bills Mafia, obviously near and dear to my heart. But when I actually pull the trigger after going through the diligence, sign the veritable check, that has to be a financial ROI investment. Okay. And it was the same here as some of the things we already spoke about with regards to the entrance of private equity into the NFL for franchises as minority owners. And even just recently, I think you guys were talking about in the last one of your last podcasts. I mean, the viewership for NFL has never been higher in our crazy media 24/7 world. And, my Bills set a record in the Ravens game, right? And then again in the Chiefs game from a viewership perspective. So to me, it starts with passion, but the diligence piece always has to look to me like a good investment.
Well, I'm going to ask Tom as well on this, because the Bills, New York Governor Kathy Hochul is trying to put a deal together to get a whole brand new stadium going. Take us through how that impacts trying to be a minority investor in a team like the Buffalo Bills.
Well, certainly, like any investment, you're going to do diligence on your target, on the business, and what's more important to any team than where they play their games, right? The focus in professional sports, not just the NFL right now, on all team owners is on their venues, right? There's been a lot of movement towards taking your arena or your stadium from just a place that people go to 8 to 10 times a year if you're an NFL team to a year-round destination. And so everybody in professional sports, especially the NFL, is focusing on upgrading their venues. And that was certainly part of Theresa's calculus when she made this investment, that the Bills are keeping up and going to be having great venues in the future.
Well, Tom McDermott, this isn't your first, kind of rodeo. You've been involved in other, I'm sure, sports teams, the Major League Baseball, MLS, I'm looking NBA, National Hockey League. You've done it all. How did this process differ from some of those other processes? Like, how did the NFL handle this? Were they on their game? Is this new for them?
It was new. It was new. Everyone read that the NFL owners opened up their doors to private equity back in August, but this was actually the first, if not the second. We'll call it the first. The Miami deal and the Buffalo Bills deal were effectively on the same timetable, so it was the first time that the NFL was actually doing a live deal with a PE investor. So it was new. So there was some novelty to the transaction from the NFL's perspective.
Our thanks to Theresia Gouw, co-founder and managing partner at Acrew Capital, and Tom Conaghan of the Capital Markets Group at McDermott, Will, and Emery for joining us. Up next, we take you to New Orleans and Radio Row for a few special conversations ahead of the big game. For my colleague Damian Sassower, I'm Michael Barr. You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.
This is Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
Thanks for joining us on the Bloomberg Business of Sports, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr. It's a special big game edition of the show today as we look ahead to Super Bowl 59 between the Chiefs and the Eagles. It's a rematch of the big game from just a few years ago where the Chiefs beat the Eagles 38-35 in 2023.
Mahomes in trouble, gets away. Mahomes racing with the bad ankle and all, inside the 20, and he's taken down. Somehow Patrick Mahomes. Hurts has all day. Now some rushers come. Going to throw it as far as his arm can take it, which is well short. And the Kansas City Chiefs have won Super Bowl 57.
Some of our colleagues went down to New Orleans this week and rubbed shoulders with some of the biggest names in sports. Bloomberg Originals sports correspondent Vanessa Perdomo caught up with former Dallas Cowboys star Dez Bryant at Radio Row, and they talked about some of the latest trends in football, including NIL and his involvement in sports betting. Let's take a listen.
I guess I grew up playing sports all my life. Mm-hmm. I love basketball, so that's kind of where, I start and stop. I feel like I made good plays and good money. And also, I'm also in the betting community.
So for you, obviously, when you're not able to be in it as a player, do you think that there's some sort of way that sports books or maybe, the league can try and get current players involved, maybe even just getting them on the back end of plays?
Give them a piece.
Yeah.
Give them a piece. At the end of the day, I think it's going to be more excitement for the fans, for the players. We just got to find a way to where it all makes sense. Right. I got ideas right now that I want to share, but I'm giving them to fanatics, and they're gonna come save me for that.
They're gonna try and get
for these ideas. You feel me?
Yeah. So another thing that you weren't able to get in on when you were playing is NIL in college.
I would have broke the bank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how would you have navigated the system?
I think I'm a natural. I have a natural business mind. Mm-hmm. Before I even understood what it was, just the way I thought. I wanted to have my own brand. Mm-hmm. One of the guys I looked up to the most was MJ. Mm-hmm. Before I even understood what a brand was, I did understand that Jumpman logo was different from that check.
Right.
And when I thought of the Jumpman, I just thought of MJ. Mm-hmm. I was like, man, I want that.
That's former Dallas Cowboys star Dez Bryant with Vanessa Perdomo from Radio Row in New Orleans earlier this week. Bloomberg U.S. sports business reporter Randall Williams was there too and got a chance to talk with a current football star who is looking beyond the big game and toward joining a new team in the future. Cleveland Browns edge Myles Garrett recently made his desire to play for a new team public. Let's listen in on his conversation about what could be next for him with Randall Williams.
I want to ask you, you requested a trade. You don't need to get into details. You've been talking to every other show about that. Mm-hmm. But when you're considering market, you have a lot of endorsements, a lot of different business opportunities. Do you think about state taxes, things like that when you put in a trade request, or is it all about winning right now?
It's all about winning. Mm-hmm. I mean, that stuff will be looked into afterward. Something becomes a little bit more solid or tangible, but that's just doing research on wherever is next home base. But just focus on winning and have an opportunity to go into the playoffs and win.
Now let's talk about Cleveland a little bit. Talk about what the city has meant to you. You've been there for a long time. You've worn that number 95 jersey forever. Mm-hmm. What has the city meant to you over your course of being there?
I mean, it's really become a second home for me. I've loved my time there, being part of the community, giving back, and it's really become part of my family.
Sure.
I've loved my time, and it's been invaluable. Learning to be somewhere else, so far away from home. A lot of different variables and new things, and it really helped my journey into becoming a man, a professional. I had the joy of working with a lot of great people and meeting a lot of great people, and Northeast Ohio will always remain special to me.
On the money side of things, I wonder, have you begun to think about what the next phase of your career looks like? I know you're thinking about championship, where you're going next, but when you do eventually have to hang up your cleats and work in an office like me or the people to our right, or do something along those lines, whether you're in a broadcasting booth, what does the next phase of Myles Garrett look like? Have you thought about that?
It won't look like an office. Definitely not. It won't look like a broadcasting booth.
Broadcasting?
Definitely not.
Okay.
You might get me for like a special guest appearance on one night only.
Sure.
I want to focus on the things that I've always loved doing. Photography, maybe being a wildlife shooter. I've always wanted to work with Nat Geo. Maybe doing some sports myself. Shooting different sports at different great arenas, or continue working on some literature, whether it's poetry, short stories, even some things I'm working on currently, which is like a horror story.
Okay. About what?
Can't particularly.
Come on, you gotta give me something.
Can't get too deep into that. I will say it deals with the anxiety of moving away from home for the first time. Stepping into that role of being a man, going into college, but also suffering from the pressures of being an athlete and different conditions that come with that.
That's current Cleveland Brown star Myles Garrett speaking with our own Randall Williams from New Orleans ahead of the big game. NFL Hall of Famer and four-time Super Bowl champion quarterback Joe Montana was also there, and Vanessa Perdomo got a chance to talk with him about the state of the league and touched on what he thinks about the NFL increasing its presence internationally. Let's listen to some of their conversation.
Next Super Bowl's in San Francisco. Yeah. Are you mentally preparing for that one already?
Yeah, the last time it was there was fun.
Yeah.
It's you like to go visit places like New Orleans and New York and L.A. and everywhere else they have it, but it's fun when it's in the Bay Area. You don't have to fight traffic in the airports.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I can imagine you're a little busy, though, doing all of the press and all of that stuff that you have to do.
Yeah, I stay busy through a good portion of it. From Thursday, a little bit slower towards the end of the week, but it's always fun to come here. You run into some old people and you all tell all the same old lies.
Yeah, it does seem like a fraternity walking around Radio Row for sure. So the NFL is thinking about going to an 18-game season. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's okay as long as they shorten the preseason games. Nobody likes the preseason games. I think the preseason games are more for a test of the younger guys that are the draftees and some teams that you may have traded for during the offseason. But I think it's okay. I mean, you're going to play that many games anyway. But if they can shorten and keep the first part to a minimum, I think everyone would be fine.
Okay.
Everybody likes playing for real.
Right, yeah. So the preseason games, getting rid of them wouldn't be super consequential, you feel like, to get prepared for the season?
No, I think, nowadays, even when I was still with the Chiefs, we would go down and practice again. Our facility, our summer workout was near the Saints, and so we would go down and scrimmage them in the while we were getting ready for training camp. So I think there's ways to get around doing that and timing things up, and everybody will have the same problem.
Right. As long as you're prepared going into the season, right?
Yeah. So it'll be an advantage for some veteran teams, but
that's fair. Yeah, for sure. So the other thing that the NFL is doing is adding a lot more international games. We've seen that Australia got added. I mean, that's quite far away for travel.
My friend already called me. Hey, are you coming? Tell the NFL to bring you down here and be a liaison. So I'm like.
So you're excited
I didn't even know. I just saw it. Yeah.
You're excited about it as a former player. What about if you were playing in those games?
Well, they're going to take them down there plenty of time ahead. It would be my guess, and I think going international is fun. I mean, we only went for preseason when I was playing, but I think playing games for real it's a lot more meaningful, and it's a lot better for the fans of that country.
Do you see how global the game of football has gotten since there's been more international football now?
Oh, yeah. And I think that was been what the NFL realized was that's been the biggest downfall was that they didn't try to go global earlier.
One of the things that we're seeing on the global stage also is now that flag football has gotten added to the Olympics for 2028. What do you think about that being added to the Olympics? Do you think it's going to do even more for the NFL and just football in general?
I think it definitely would do more for football in general. Is it an Olympic sport? Who knows? I mean, there's all kind of crazy things in there now, right? So, but it'll be fun for people to watch. It's always exciting. The ball's always getting thrown around. And it'll help teach people what football really is about.
It remains to be seen if NFL players are going to be able to play in it or are going to want to play in it. Would you have played? I mean, Olympian's a different title. It's a prestigious one.
I think it's a little different than like the NBA and all that. It's still a physical game in the NBA, but I think that what the guys are making these days, I don't think the owners will want to have them running around playing flag football for the Olympics.
That's fair. So what it is going to do is a lot for women's flag football, right? And that we're seeing that as a big step.
Yeah, you see that more and more everywhere. That flag is coming up instead of padded football these days to a certain age, and I think that's fine. I think early on for kids, pads are okay. I always say because when they're really little, it's like bunch ball, right? Nobody, they all go in a bunch and then they all fall down.
They're not reading the playbook yet.
No. And then what happens is when one guy gets, all of a sudden, there's one or two guys that grow faster than others, and that's when the game becomes difficult, I think, for kids in the contact side of it.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I'm all for it. And whatever, early on in pads and then go to flag. Yep.
And last we got to ask, are you picking your former team?
Yeah, I got to.
Yeah.
It's hard to bet against them. I think everybody likes to see Philly win, but it's hard to bet against the Chiefs.
That's NFL legend Joe Montana speaking with our Vanessa Perdomo this week from New Orleans on Radio Row. And that does it for this special big game edition of the Bloomberg Business of Sports. For my colleagues Damian, Sassower, and Scarlet Fu, I'm Michael Barr. Special thanks to Bloomberg Originals sports correspondent Vanessa Perdomo. Thank you. And Bloomberg U.S. sports business reporter Randall Williams for their work down in New Orleans. And the crew that went down. That's you, Sebastian. Thank you. And thanks for joining us, and enjoy the game. Tune in again next week for the latest on the stories moving big money in the world of sports. And don't forget to catch our podcast on all your podcast platforms. You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.